My name is Jenna Schroder, and this is my place in Canadian history. My grandfather was born on June 25, 1929, and grew up in Oud-Marsum, Holland, along with his 6 older siblings and 1 younger sister. He was 10 years old when the Second World War began, and he was exposed to all the hardship, pain, and suffering that the war brought with it. His older brothers were sent off to fight in the war, and his family had limited rations. The Nazis had occupied the Netherlands, and a culture of fear spread throughout Europe. Their farm was close to the German border. Therefore, they often had German soldiers sleeping in their barns and eating any food growing on the farm. On a number of occasions, they helped Allied soldiers escape German capture by keeping them in a hidden room in the hayloft of the barn. There was one such time that the German soldiers came to stay in the barn while some Canadian soldiers were already in the hidden room. Although they were unable to eat or leave, they managed to keep quiet and the Germans didn't notice, or else everybody's lives could have been in great danger. World War II and the subsequent Nazi occupation of Holland was of great historical significance to my family as it left a dark imprint on my grandfather's past. The Netherlands was liberated from Nazi rule by the Canadian Army on May 5, 1945, 2 days before the official surrender of Germany. Days after the war, Canadian soldiers were admired and treated as heroes as they marched through the streets of Holland. For the first time in his life, Canada was on my grandfather's radar as a place he might be interested in moving to. Although the war was over, the effects on the land and people of the Netherlands still remained. In the years following the war, limited opportunities were available for farming in Holland. Hence, my grandfather decided to come to Canada as part of a school program sending students to work. The other option was New York, previously known as New Amsterdam, but he decided to go to Canada since it had more plentiful agricultural opportunities. On April 14, 1956, he, along with several other young men, set sail out of Rotterdam on a 2-week-long journey across the Atlantic Ocean to Halifax on a boat called Groot Beer, meaning Big Bear, in search of new farming opportunities. Most of the men couldn't speak English, so in an effort to keep them from feeling homesick, the headmaster from a school in a neighboring town arranged a pen pal system between the girls in Holland and the men working in Canada. My grandfather was paired up with a girl named Anne Greta Henrika Tillintilo, who eventually became known as my grandmother. Although she had a boyfriend when she began sending letters back and forth with my grandfather, neither of them could deny the connection they shared. After witnessing the bravery of Canadian soldiers in World War II, it caused my grandfather to want to become a Canadian as well, with the consequence of him leaving the Netherlands and immigrating to Canada. 2.5 years later, my grandfather returned to Holland, where he met my grandmother for the first time face to face. They got married on April 18, 1959, and on their honeymoon they moved to Canada in search of a new beginning, leaving behind all of their friends and family. With many agricultural jobs in Holland being replaced by automation, and with limited agricultural land available, Canada was a land of opportunity. Like thousands of others, they decided to move to Canada as part of a massive post-war immigration boom, when Canada opened its doors to Europeans who sought to escape the emotional and physical effects of World War II. They arrived by plane in Montreal on April 23, 1959, and they took a train to London, Ontario. My grandparents moved to Canada because it would promise an abundance of farming land, good job opportunities, and the ability to establish themselves in a new country. When considering historical perspective, my grandparents took a risk and were motivated to come to Canada to start a new life. They believed that family, religion, and economic stability were important pillars of life, and these drove their decisions to start anew in Canada. They were just 2 of thousands of Dutch people who immigrated to Canada in the years following World War II. Dutch people were quickly moving to Canada, along with my grandparents, because of farming opportunities available in Ontario and in the western provinces. In Ontario, most people settled in southwestern areas, including my grandparents. After working multiple jobs, including running a dairy operation in St. Thomas, my grandparents finally saved up enough money to buy a tomato farm in Tillsonburg, Ontario. They supplied fresh tomatoes to local A&P and IGA stores. As a housewarming present, the owner of the farm where my grandfather worked gifted him 3 cows so he could start a dairy operation of his own. His dreams were starting to come true, and with the rise of machinery like the combine and other technology, farming in Canada had a promising future. The combination of experienced agricultural workers, availability of quality land, and the advancement of technology resulted in the growth of family farms. These farms were historically significant as they became a new contributor to the growth of the Canadian economy, as well as they began to increase the growth of the agricultural industry in Canada. Since their arrival after World War II, Dutch farmers have played an important role in dairy and crop farming in Ontario, with generations of Dutch Canadians continuing the tradition. My grandparents gradually converted their tomato farm into a dairy operation, and by 1970 it had grown to over 100 head of cattle. The concept of a family farm became a reality across the nation. By this time, the multicultural landscape of Canada was changing, and farmers were arriving from places outside of Europe. For example, seasonal workers from Jamaica and Mexico spent 6 months a year working on Ontario farms. Some stayed and became new Canadians. My grandparents had 5 children: Henry, Janet, Brian, Marcel, my dad, and Karen. They worked on the farm every day as they grew up, and were taught family values such as hard work and perseverance. There was never a day off on the dairy farm, but the kids always found some free time to play. This led to sportsmanship and teamwork becoming new traits learned by the Schroders. Although Dutch traditions and values were brought to Canada and continued to be observed, continuity and change brought many new Canadian traditions, such as certain culinary dishes like liverwurst, and holiday traditions such as playing hockey or shinny, changing my family's life in Canada. My dad moved to Toronto in 1985 after completing 4 years at Western University with a degree in economics. He decided to move from Tillsonburg to Toronto in search of more job opportunities since he wanted to pursue a job in the corporate world instead of farming. He started working in financial services, where he eventually met the love of his life, my mom, Carrie Grist. They got married at Holy Trinity Anglican Church in Thornhill, Ontario on May 6, 1995, and moved to Richmond Hill. Similar to many marriages in Canada, this brought together both of my parents' family traditions, and in many ways it defined them as Canadian. Canada is a multicultural society that celebrates traditions and cultures from all over the world, and my family is no exception. Many causes have been pushing the younger generations away from the more traditional agricultural work in Canada, and with the consequence of more people moving to big cities in search of jobs in new industries. So, an interest in higher education, the corporate world, and computer technology have led to a transition away from agriculture to new digitally based employment. As a result, no member of the Schroder family currently farms. Instead, most are studying or working in the Greater Toronto Area, or the GTA. I was born on February 1st, 2000, at Markham Stouffville Hospital in Markham, Ontario. My family lives in Oak Ridges with 2 cats and a dog. I have a brother named Jacob, who is 2.5 years older than me, and we grew up playing many sports. I currently play competitive hockey for the Aurora Panthers and competitive soccer for the Oak Ridges Knights. I'm 15 years old and I attend a year-round sports school in Markham with fantastic facilities and over 1,500 student athletes trying to reach their highest potential. My goals are to graduate high school as an honor roll student and have success in my sports. I aspire to go to university and pursue a job in the sports medicine field. Despite my current career aspirations, I am aware that in a decade, I will most likely be working in a specific area that is not yet defined today. In other words, the power of technology and its rapid change will lead to brand new jobs using more advanced software platforms. In addition, scientific research will have advanced another 10 years. Knowledge and treatments for sports injuries and methods for furthering athletic performance will be that much more sophisticated. For example, hockey equipment may be lighter and stronger, and athletes may be more efficient. Progress in athletic diets, training modalities, and sport-specific research will lead to improvements in performance. I may see the first human to run the 100-meter dash in 9 seconds flat. The decisions my grandparents made to come to Canada many decades ago have influenced the person I've become today. Their hard work and perseverance and growth mindset allowed them to uphold their Dutch traditions of the past while embracing their new Canadian reality. I am inspired by their strength and bravery and plan on continuing their family traditions for years to come in Canada.